Hello and welcome to There's No Business Like, a podcast where friends and industry colleagues explore topics and interview leaders in our industry of professional theatrical touring.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to There's No Business Like. I'm Katie Traska-Miller with Michigan Maven Creative Associates, and I am here with my two friends, Danielle.
Oh, hey, it's Danielle Van Hook from the Alden and McLean, Virginia.
And Brian.
Hey, Brian Zelmer Traska Van Hook from the Bardavon in Poughkeepsie.
So many words.
Josh and Kevin are not with us today because they are literally traveling to Michigan right now to come see me. And I'm so excited. We are actually, the three of us are going to be seeing a world premiere of a brand new play at the Wharton Center in East Lansing. And then they're coming to Midland to see a show here. So I get to show off all the wonderful art that Michigan has to offer.
Yeah, feels like my invitation got lost in the mail.
Or I'd say you get to show Michigan the wonderful friends you have on the podcast.
That works too. So, all right. Well, the three of us are going to get into our interview here in just a moment, but I have a question for you, Danielle and Brian. What is your favorite strangest combo? So maybe two things that seemingly don't go together, but at the end of the day are a perfect match.
All I'm thinking about right now is food.
Same.
And so I'm sure there are other things in this world that don't match that I enjoy, but the only things that just went through my brain are food. But there will never be a time in my life that peanut butter and chocolate don't go together. But something that my husband particularly thinks is a great combination that I don't understand. And if anybody else has had this experience, I would like to hear from them. If we have pasta with red sauce of any kind, the drink he has to have is milk. Ooh. And like he will occasionally have milk with dinner because sometimes he likes milk.
There's nothing wrong with that. I'm with your husband on this.
Okay, but like he will not have red sauce pasta without milk. Like they go together.
Yeah, I could see that.
Like we can't sit down with that meal and not have milk. And I'll pour us water. I'll be doing like whatever. I won't be thinking about it. And he'll be like, why was there water? And I'm like, well, because that's the beverage we nearly always drink with dinner. And he's like, but milk. And I'm like, okay, get your own milk. Like you're just lucky. Like I poured myself a water. I just thought I'd be nice and pour you. And like, I forget that all the time. And I do not understand how red sauce pasta and milk go together.
That's got to be something left over from his childhood.
It is.
Like a thing that
but like they had milk with every meal. I just don't understand why the milk in the spaghetti is inexplicitly linked.
I grew up that way too, so I can understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I had milk with dinner. Like my kids have milk with dinner, but they eat other foods other than spaghetti.
Well, I have not had that combination, probably when I was a kid, but I've not had that combo in a while. But if it works for him, then more power to him.
So it's not my favorite. I think it's weird. but
he loves it. Okay. Brian, do you have a combo?
I try so hard to not think of food combinations too, but that's just where my brain goes to. So I don't think it's that weird of a combo, but I love, I've done it since I was a little kid. I love to go to McDonald's every once in a while and I'll get a cheeseburger and I load it up with fries and ketchup and then smush it all together and eat it.
Oh, that's just a Pennsylvania thing.
Well, I didn't grow up in Pennsylvania, though. I've done it my whole life pretty much. And people always look at me weird when I'm in the restaurant doing it, but it's pretty normal.
I did that as a kid, too.
It traveled up the interstate from PA to New York, right? Like that's probably just a regional thing.
Yeah, no, I totally always did that, too. It's so good.
I've never done that combo, but I can see how it would be appealing.
It is.
Yeah.
Like, okay. I think it's like, for me, it was inspired by like the permane sandwich, which is like a normal, like basically deli sandwich, but with like a butt ton of coleslaw and like an entire order of fries on it and then cut in half. And like, especially when you're a kid, like larger than your mouth to eat. And that is delicious. But that's a very like started in Pittsburgh thing.
All right, this is urgent. I need Katie to throw it to the interview now so I can go get some food because you're making me hungry.
Brian, the snack attack is strong with Brian today. So, okay, well, quickly, so Brian can go have a snack. My favorite combo is not food. It is actually the two characters, Jake and Amy from the show Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Oh,
so Amy,
yeah.
I am very much an Amy. I love office supplies. People would say I'm a type A personality. I'm incredibly organized. And if you've ever watched the show, you know that the character Jake Peralta is exactly the opposite, but they are a great combination because they share the same values at the end of the day, and they treat each other with such respect. On the surface, you wouldn't think they would go together, but at the end of the day, they're one of, I would say, TV's all-time greatest couples. So that is my favorite combo. This leads us into our conversation today. I talked to the two founders and leaders of a dance company called Project Convergence out of both New York and Seattle, Washington. And they combine a traditional Indian dance style with American tap. And these are two dance styles you would think maybe wouldn't go together, but when you see them, they make total sense. So we have a wide-ranging conversation, and we're going to get into it right now.
Hi, I'm Apoorva Natarajan, dancer, choreographer, teacher, based out of Seattle, Washington currently, co-director of Project Convergence, where I primarily direct and teach and choreograph for the Bharatanatyam side of things.
Hi, everyone. I'm Vikas Arun, a dancer, teacher, choreographer, bicoastally based out of Seattle and New York. I co-direct Project Convergence with Apoorva, teaching and choreographing and directing the tap side of the dance company.
Excellent. Well, Apoorva and Vikas, welcome so much to There's No Business Like. It is such a pleasure to have you. I'm excited for our conversation today. Vikas, you and I met at the 2025 Midwest Arts XPO this past fall and had a really interesting conversation about the business side of the dance world. So I'm excited to get into that more with both of you today. Before we do that, though, I would love for you to just give us a little bit of background on Project Convergence, your dance company. How did the two of you meet? How did it come to be? And how did you bring these two very different styles of dance together into one art form?
The company was started in New York. Actually, so I started with a different co-founder who Apoorva also knows pretty well, and was originally started just because that co-founder, Ramita, and I had shared the stage together on other shows, and we just realized that both of us had this interest in percussive dance. And so we started creating just YouTube videos, because that's how you went viral back in the day. I feel like I'm old and dating myself. But we created 2 YouTube videos. They really took off, and we kind of realized we were on to something more than just like a video. And then the American Tap Dance Foundation offered us residency space to turn it into a company. And then over time, we were doing some corporate events and private events, and Ramita kind of realized that was not exactly what she wanted long-term out of her dance career. But Apoorva and I have known each other since we were 1 year old. And Apoorva had gone to elementary and middle and high school in India, but come back to the US for college. So we kind of reconnected at the opportune time. And Apoorva and I realized we both had an interest in creating a touring show together. And so this felt sort of the right vehicle to do that. So now Project Convergence has a team of New York dancers and a team of Seattle dancers, and both teams are touring our show across the country. So that's kind of how the short history of how we came to be.
Amazing. And Apoorva, can you tell us about the actual company and the styles that you two have brought together for what I think is something so unique and beautiful? And as a tapper myself, I was wait, what is this? What is this? So tell us more.
So a brief note about Bharatanatyam is it's primarily a theatrical dance form. So it's got dance, but it's also got, it's dance in the sense of rhythmic footwork, but it's also got a lot of, just like other styles of dance, expressive body movement from, the torso up, and also gestural storytelling. So uses hand gestures, facial expressions alongside music to tell stories. And that is a really intrinsic part of the dance style. Of course, the percussive part of it is also an intrinsic part of the dance style. So we very much kind of landed on the start of the collaboration being from there. And I think part of what makes the collaboration so special is that because we are a percussive dance form that hasn't necessarily leaned so hard into the percussive nature of the dance style, this collaboration allows us to fall into that a little bit more deeply. And for the tappers, it pushes them in a completely different direction in the sense of trying a lot of new expressive upper body, trying to use your arms, trying to use your torso a little more. And so the way that we have heard it is we have a lot of people who approach us and are isn't this a better fit to collaborate for you? And yes, that may be on first sight seen a better fit, but we just love that there is a very obvious collaboration here in terms of there being this connection and thread through the percussive nature of both styles, but also the way that we both push each other's styles in like new directions. So we really like that about kind of the collaboration as well.
How did you determine, or how did you figure out that these two were such a good fit? And how did you start melding the two styles together? And how do you teach that dance style? And are your dancers coming in trained in one or both styles? Like, how does that work artistically?
So I think our dancers are generally trained in one or the other. Part of that is just they live in pretty different worlds. The way that both the training landscape is for both of these styles of dance is there's a lot of people who go through kind of the pipeline of learning these dance styles K through 12. And we have a few folks who are kind of, they chose to kind of explore a wide variety of dance styles and then they come to us. And so we have kind of dancers who have a broad background in dance, and that really helps approach the collaboration just for them because they come with a really open mind, which I think is the first thing that you need when you're trying to force yourself out of your comfort zone quite a bit. I think that our collaborative style and how we teach is really heavily influenced by our relationship with each other. Like, we're really just great friends, and part of what it is was just a big experiment. So when we get into a studio together, there really was no clear path in terms of like the right way to do this. And so it was really just let's try this, let's try that. In this space, maybe if I were to match you, I would try to do something like this. I don't really want to match you here. I want to counter you here. So how would I approach doing that in my own style? This piece of music, this part of our dance requires this type of movement. Does that feel right for you? So there's a lot of these questions that we kind of throw at each other. And we, I think, are really, again, open-minded in the sense of like, today Vikas is going to lead rehearsal and he is going to just tell me everything that comes into his brain, and I'm going to see how I can distill that into my own style. And sometimes it's the other way around. Sometimes it is really both of us co-creating in terms of, I like this, let's take this, let's pull on this thread, let's see where this leads us. But we definitely are people who were able to go into this space with an open mind and see where the collaboration really organically leads us.
Yeah, just to add on to that, we don't have a formula when we create pieces. Like, I think people kind of expect that, like, oh, you figured out that always, I don't know, Vikas does X and then Apoorva does Y. And it's like, no, every piece and even every chapter of each piece is actually different. So at a given point, we've assigned who's like directing that section. And so that person's sort of like the lead voice. They're kind of deciding kind of what their style is doing first, and maybe even directing what the other person's choreography is once they come up with it. For example, on Monday, we created a new intro for one of our acts for our shows. And because our vision for it was more traditional to Bharatanatyam, like Apoorva was mostly leading it, and I was mostly just creating phrases that felt like they matched. And then sometimes when I would get stuck, I would be like, okay, I'm trying to match you here, but I feel like this is not working. And like, she gave a piece of feedback on Monday, which was like, instead of matching the visual, why don't you match the energy, but in your vocabulary, and see how that works.
That's so interesting. Thank you for explaining that a little bit more. And I highly recommend to our listeners to go to the Project Convergence website and check out the videos, because it is so fascinating and beautiful to watch. I spent probably more time than I should have watching your videos, because I was just so fascinated by it in prepping for our conversation today. So highly recommend. So you two are partners in the artistic side of things, also partners in terms of leading the company and the business side. We met, as I mentioned earlier, at the Midwest Arts XPO, and we had a great conversation about the modern business model of dance companies in the U.S. right now. So can you both give me sort of the top line of how you see the artistry and business of dance morphing in the U.S. performing arts industry today?
I think until recently, most people viewed dance as an art form that could not be financially successful, by which I mean the presenter or presenting organization would have to take a loss presenting dance. And so most dance companies, therefore, spent their time advocating to be like one of the only dance companies presented in that whole presenter's season, or maybe even 2 seasons, because the presenter would need to have many shows that made a profit to cover the loss that came from presenting dance. And I think historically that has been sort of the unsaid or sometimes explicitly said expectation from dance companies that present work. And when I say that, I'm thinking largely of like the big established dance companies like the Alvin Ailey's of the world or the Hubbard Street dance companies of the world that bring like 10, 15, maybe even 20 artists, and they have sets and they have all these things. And that has historically been what people are expecting. They're expecting the theater is going to have them tech for 2 or 3 days, and they're going to bring in these sets, and they have 20 hotel rooms and all these things. And there's just no way to make that money back from the presenter's perspective. What we're trying to do is we're really trying to turn that on its head, because we believe very strongly that if we can make dance more sustainable, then more dance gets presented, right? Because like whether we like it or not, we live in a capitalist society, and one can think that we shouldn't, but like that's how the U.S. works. And so if we can make dance cheaper and or increase the audiences that are coming to dance, that makes a dance either profitable or at least less subsidized, and that allows more dance companies to be presented by a presenter in a given season because they're taking less of a loss. And so I think that's the general thesis of like how we think about our financial side of things. And so that informs a lot of decisions we make about cast size, how we book, fee structure, all of that. But that's like the mission. The mission is like accessibility of dance. And accessibility also shows itself in like size of venue we go to. Like we don't want to have to go to a 1,500 person venue for us to be able to pull a profit. We can go to a 300 seat venue and the presenter can still break even. And that's like really, really important to us, that the small towns and the smaller venues can still get access to our work. And because that's so important to us, we like do everything in service of that.
So 2 key phrases you just said: cheaper, more audiences. So let's talk about cheaper. Let's talk about how you're making your company more sustainable. So I know you've played around with number of company members, how you're touring, the logistics of that. So can you dive into a little bit of that for me in terms of how you're making your company more sustainable and how that translates into savings and then in turn profit for presenters that you're working with?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I'll say is that we really do run a tight, lean ship that should not be unsaid. I think part of it is the way that Vikas and I have needed to operate to sustain this model is that we do our own lights, our own sound, our own costume. We are the people who do all of that work. And of course, even the routing of the tour, if the presenter asks it, the booking of the hotel rooms or travel expenses as well. So when you think about a lot of other companies, there are tour managers and there's stage managers who travel with the company, or there's lighting designers that travel with the company. And that's additional people that need to be there on set, need to be fed, need to be flown over, need to have a place to stay. And so when we say we run a lean ship, we're like, we are 8 dancers on stage, 8 dancers on tour. Vikas and I, if we're on tour for that specific show, are included in that. And we are also there, the lighting designer. We're also managing sound. We're also managing logistics while we're on site on tour. And so cast size is a really big one. And lumped in with cast size comes kind of wearing multiple hats and doing multiple roles so that we can keep cast size small, which includes kind of having multiple roles, not just for us, but even sometimes for our dancers. So for instance, in the first act of our show, we have a dancer who is not on stage, but is calling lights on this on side stage. And so part of that is kind of also being able to balance and rotate roles within our existing cast of dancers. I think part 2 of that, I would say, is kind of just in having the logistics be leaner on show day. So we don't travel with a set. For this particular show, there's not a lot of stuff that needs to be assembled or put together. And again, another part of that is we tech very quickly, which means that we don't need to get there the day before. We often get there on the same day and then do lights and sounds and all that logistics, so that the venue doesn't have to have an additional day of fees and costs associated with labor that come with having that day of preparation in advance of the show. And so we're sort of really not only with cast size, but also optimizing for time and other expenses that go on to the presenter. We really control costs in a lot of those ways. And part of it is, I think, really maybe one of the most special things about doing this art form for both of us is that we because it's a percussive show, really know what we can do and the impact that we can have in a space. And part of that comes from just dance. Not to say that other folks aren't able to make that impact. We really do believe that a lot of the artistry speaks for itself, and a lot of the experience of being at a percussive dance show is just from feeling the vibrations in the room. And we are really, really able to be effective with our show without needing big props or anything that is much more elaborate for this particular show.
And not to say that companies that need those things or want those things like are any lesser, any better or whatever, but it's like this is just a different way of being really thoughtful about how to tour more effectively and efficiently for you all and make it a better experience for the presenter too.
We may even need those things in another show that we do in the future. It's not to say that that's kind of not something that we ourselves are interested in. It was just kind of, and I think accessibility being really at the core of what we want to do with this show means that we really have to weigh every extra hour that we spend in the theater, every extra day that we have to be put up at a hotel in terms of, can a smaller theater afford this? Is this something that we are willing to sacrifice in order to like get our feet in the door of a small town, getting seen by people who might never have access to like work like this? And I think that's, again, a conscious decision that we made in service of accessibility.
Yeah, that's the thing I would say for other artists out there, because like everyone makes art for different reasons. But for us, we would so much rather forgo something in a show that allows us to go to another venue. That's like so critical for us. Like just being out there and being seen for this show is the most important thing. And so we consciously forgo certain choices. We will remove light cues. We will remove props for the service of keeping our tech time down and keeping it accessible. So it does require hard decisions on the artistic side, but it's because we're leading with this mission first. Like we are getting out there to even the 3,000 person town. And to do that, that means we're not going to be able to put on the grandest of shows for this specific show. To Apoorva's point, we'll have another show in a few years that is more grand, but then we know that it's not going to tour as much and it's only going to be at the big venues, and we have to be comfortable with that choice. You can't have a big budget show and then also ask why everyone isn't booking it, right? You have to ask yourself really what's more important to you, because those things are at odds with each other.
On that mission point, do you find that that is in line with other companies that you're interacting with, or does that feel sort of at odds with maybe other philosophies in the dance world?
Obviously, we don't interact with everyone, so I'm sure there's someone out there who is operating in a similar landscape. I don't know if we have quite encountered that person yet, or that organization yet. And I don't think it's because people... Like, I do think people want to think that way. I don't think it's like dancers don't want their work to be accessible or anything. I think it's just really hard to think of a different model than the prevailing one in any, even not in the arts business, just in the world, right? Like it's hard to go against the norm. And so it's very easy to be like, oh, this is the way it works, so this is the way we're going to do it. And so I've seen people trending in that direction, particularly at Max. There was a lot of conversation about the affordability of dance and dance success stories. So it does feel like the pendulum is starting to swing and we're just kind of on the forward end of it. So I think people have the desire. It just takes a second for that desire to turn into actual action in terms of changes you're making to your show or to the company to fulfill that desire.
Do you think that sort of slow turn comes out of the very like classical training that particularly dance in the United States is really grounded in? Those norms have been set for a very long time in terms of how dance companies operate. Tap is a little outside of that, right? So I think like there's probably a lot of influence there because tap companies tend to operate, I think, more in a more lean fashion too. So how much of that lack of change or sort of like slow turning of the ship comes from sort of that very classical side of the industry?
My instinct is a large amount, because I think Bharatanatyam in the U.S. faces a similar thing. Maybe the other way I'd phrase it is we represent dance styles that don't get a lot of private or public funding, right? Like ballet, Pacific Northwest Ballet here in Washington gets like $500,000 of funding every year from the county government, for example. Tap dance companies do not get that, right? Big ballet companies are used to being subsidized, ignoring the touring ecosystem. Just in general, their ethos is they're used to being subsidized, right? Versus, to your point, we can get into the history of it later, but like tap companies are not used to that. In the US, Indian dance companies are not used to that, or folk/cultural. I hate that term, but that's the category that people put them in. And so non-American dance styles are not used to that. And so I think that breeds how we think, because we're forced to think that way, even ignoring the whole touring side of the ecosystem. Even when we perform locally, like, we just can't do gigs that are not paying the dancers what they're worth, because we don't have subsidy through any other means. And so I think it's born out of a sense of necessity to some extent. And I think that's also why you're seeing the shift happening at exactly the moment that presenters are interested in diversifying the type of dance that's presented. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think if you want to see more diverse dance presented, then you have to present it in a way that cannot depend on, or as much on, subsidy, because the dance styles that you're asking for, whether it's like hip hop, African dance, flamenco, whatever, have not had that subsidy. So the only way they're going to be presented is if they can somewhat break even on each show.
In terms of presenting more diverse styles of dance, is money the only barrier that you see, or are there other things that you've come across that are seemingly still a barrier to presenting dance, just period, or specific types of dance?
To call back to something Vikas said earlier, it's not necessarily expensive so much for presenters. It may not be necessarily expensive in even, oh, I'm splashing cash on you, but I just don't know if our audience is going to be interested. I don't know if our audience is going to like it. I don't know if they're going to connect with it. And so much of that is maybe relative to what they've presented in the past, and what feels like, well, if it doesn't have a story, I'm maybe not as interested. If it doesn't have a theme, I don't know if our folks will even know what they're coming to watch. And so that's really, I think, the difference between someone saying, hey, we're going to bring a rock band in, we're going to bring a country singer in, and you immediately know, even if you don't know those musicians, what to expect when you walk into a venue, in a way that for a lot of audience members, when they say, hey, we're bringing in a show that does tap and Indian dance, they have probably no idea what to expect. And without the right, I guess, talking about marketing a little bit, but without the right presentation of the work, the theater is just going to end up feeling like, hey, we spent this money on this and no one came, or people didn't, think that we thought that people wouldn't be interested, and we were right. And that's like maybe the worst feeling you could have as a company, when someone has an impression about you sight unseen, and it's confirmed by that kind of situation.
I would actually say the biggest barrier for us, which I think is created by we'll call it the status quo dance ecosystem, is that dance is not entertaining or accessible to your average person. And I think that's a really, really dangerous default to have. There are a lot of dance companies out there who present like repertoire work, right? Which is like, we do 3 pieces, they're unrelated to each other. These are just like 3 20-minute pieces that we created, and you enjoy them and you go away. And that's like great and wonderful, but it's really hard for an audience to click yes to buy a ticket on that, right? Because unless you're like an Alvin Ailey, who everyone just knows, Project Convergence is not yet that, maybe someday. But like, when we are who we are, which is we're a small company, we have to give an audience something to bite. And so for us, like, our marketing material, I mean, I think even you said it, people look at our postcards or our posters and they're immediately like, oh, they immediately understand what we do. And so being able to find material like that to be like, this show is about rhythm. The whole storyline is about finding music that we can dance to together. Immediately people can like click and bite onto something about that. And so that's part of the accessibility here, is like, we do sell, more tickets, more diverse ages, more diverse backgrounds of people into our shows. We don't know why, because it's like hard to like prove, but our instinct is it's because like how we market the show. And a lot of that is, it's high energy, it's funny, it's rhythmic, it's energetic. All of that, like, I think is different from what people are used to seeing from like a dance show. It's important for us to entertain the audience and have people smiling. That's like why we do this. And I think that is not necessarily why other dance companies create dance. And that doesn't mean that's wrong, but like, I think that is more aligned with what a presenter is on default looking for from a thing that they're taking a risk on. And that does help.
Keeping entertainment at the core of sort of what you're doing, and the joy and happiness, the blend of the artistic and the entertainment is where you're finding your sweet spot. So how are presenters reacting to those marketing materials, and what are they finding that works from what you give them? Is it the videos? Is it the postcards? Is it the posters? Is it social media content that you're putting together? Like, what are they finding is working in marketing your show and getting audiences in the door?
you're going to hate this answer, but it depends on the theater. And I think that's
legit.
The bingo
That's legit.
answer that I think artists miss is like, if you're going to a 3,000 person small town, like TikTok doesn't matter. What matters is the radio interview, because people listen to their like local, whatever, KEXP or whatever the equivalent is in their community. And so Apoorva and I will jump on and do a radio interview, because in that community, that's what matters. And if they can hear us talk about it like this, for that community, that's what matters. When you're in a bigger city, like a metropolitan area, like whatever, LA, San Francisco, where there's, people are not cued in that way, then yes, the video marketing on social media and the posters and whatever matters. So we try and find that we do a marketing meeting with everyone so that we can find out how they typically find their audience. And then we do some stuff that's like community specific. We'll try and give them posters and have them put them up in like South Asian community venues or tap dance community venues, so that they can tap into the niche that might not normally be in their theater, but is like really specific to our show. I think artists need to have all of the above and be ready to be a Swiss Army knife and like use whatever tool is best for that specific presenter. Like, just like we as artists, I think, typically expect presenters to understand that we are not all the same. And I think artists need to understand that about presenters and venues and communities too, is every community is different, even within the same city, right? Like a small 300-person venue is very different from the 1,800-person venue. And so understanding what motivates the presenter and their audience, which they understand and we don't, is really, really important in finding marketing as like a collaboration. But I mean, the 15-second video is critical. Like if someone doesn't like the first 5 seconds of your video, you have a problem, Yeah. I don't know if you have anything to add.
They are swiping. They are just going to bypass you totally.
Not even 5 seconds, like 2 seconds.
2 seconds. I know. It's too small of a window. You need one photo that hits the nail on the head in terms of expressing exactly what it is that you do. When people see our marketing, the biggest piece of feedback we get is like, wow, I instantly know what this show is going to be like just from looking. And so it's not just, oh, this is a photo that shows that you're a high caliber, high quality dancer who can do a specific pose and have a specifically expressive face. To that point, I would say it's like, if you have good photography of the show on stage, that's kind of really the money shot, right? It's telling people that like staged, this is what this work looks like. This is what this work can look like on your stage, and not just an amazing studio shot that is choreographed to look a specific way. Like people, especially like maybe in a conference setting or when we're talking about postcards and that type of thing, this is a static image, right? It's what people see from maybe like a distance. It's what people see walking past your booth. It's what people might see like when they first open up your website. It's kind of that first impression in a lot of instances. And so that's kind of the critical moment of like how not just good quality, not just like showing off the grit and the ethic and the standard, but also showing off like being as a carrier of the story in and of itself, telling your people what to expect just in a photograph.
And so we actually do this a lot. We will give our like loved ones, here are 3 options. What will make you stop and answer? Because like we intimately know our work. It's hard for us to judge that. So just like you would do with a cover letter or resume in a quote unquote regular job, we do that with marketing material sometimes. Like, I don't know, these 3 versions all feel good, and we'll be surprised sometimes that people are like, oh, obviously that one, and we were like, oh, that's the one that we hated, but okay, fine.
And sometimes it's also like leveraging, exactly like you said, different things for different folks. And so it's like here's the comedic image, here's the beautiful staged dance image, and then here is the really simple thing that we shot in the park that people really like because it's a close-up shot of the tap shoes and the bells right next to each other, and it just is like a very evocative image, even though it's not of any dance actually happening. And so it's like we've got these 3 things that are pretty much everywhere because they serve different purposes.
I love that. From a presenter perspective, that is all right on the money, because these are the conversations we have as presenters all the time about like what we really need from artists, because we can't create those materials ourselves. We're not in the studio with you, right? So if there's an artist out there who's listening that is struggling with that process, like what piece of advice would you give them to get them started in that? Because not everybody has the resources, the time, or the expertise to shoot video, to shoot photos. Like, what's the one thing that they can do to get themselves started in creating those assets so they can work better with a presenter? Good
materials does not require a lot of money. Like Apoorva mentioned, the photo that is on our landing page of our website and on every postcard was shot on the steps of my brownstone in Brooklyn. Like, that was where, nothing fancy, no extra light, no nothing. A friend shot it for free on their camera because they just like had a free weekend. So it's more about the thought of going into how we staged that. But I think it's more the time investment that's hard for a lot of artists than the monetary investment, if that makes sense. It is, and we get it. It's really hard as you're creating material to also take the time to think about how you're going to shoot and market it and whatever. And I think my encouragement to artists would be like, take 10% of your time to focus on the stuff that you're going to use for marketing. I know it feels annoying and frustrating and it takes time away from your creativity, but the worst thing you can do for yourself is to create a beautiful product that nobody can understand, or there's nothing to tell that story, because then you have this beautiful thing that nobody ever gets to see. And so without that 10% of your marketing time, like, it's just not going to go anywhere. And it sucks because you want the work to speak for itself, but people are buying a ticket off of a postcard or a 5-second video. They're not buying a ticket after seeing the whole show, right? So you have to figure out what that digestible version is. We actually, that shot is actually before we created the show, which is hilarious. It was a photo shoot that we did when we started the company, and everyone still loves it, so we just keep it.
Yeah. Let's talk about the flip side of the business conferences. Like I said, we met at Max, but I know you guys go to WA, so Western Arts Alliance, you go to Midwest Arts XPO, Arts Northwest. So are conferences useful spaces for artistic companies like yours?
I think the answer is yes, but you also have to be really tactical because they're not cheap. That's the key. Is like, I think the answer will be no if you just like show up and you're like, la-di-da-di-da, I'm like here. It's like, no, you're paying a lot of money to be there. And depending on how you price your show, you know, if you book one show, it pays it back. But that means you have to really be booking that at least one show a year for it to make financial sense for you to be there. We are super tactical, perhaps to a fault sometimes. But like Apoorva and I, for a while, we sat in June and we sent like 80 emails, super targeted to like presenters who've presented dance before that was percussive or cultural in the past 3 years, and that one of us knew, and we had asked those people for referrals, and we sent an email being like, hi, this person has referred that we talked to you. And so we had 12 meetings set up before we even got on the plane to LA. And so that to us felt like, okay, yes, we're paying a lot of money for 2 of us to fly and be in a hotel and whatever, but the chance of this panning out makes it feel worth it, even if every year that doesn't work out. So it can be, but if you're spending a lot of money, that means you have to like give it the time so that that money can be worth it, because it's not cheap, you know?
Yeah, I think it 100% would also depend on like what you are seeking to get out of the conference. I think there's a lot of people who come there to meet other artists. There are a lot of people who come there to learn other things, and those can all absolutely happen and pay dividends later. We have a lot of friends that we've met just on the conference circuit, just other artists, and but it will depend on what you're looking for, and exactly like you said, how tactically you approach getting the things that you're looking for. Like if you're trying to meet a lot of people, you want to be at every space meeting people, you want to give your card out, or you want to get their information, you want to find out how you can sort of vaguely stay in touch, whether that's following them on Instagram or whatever else. If you're going to learn, you want to like make sure that you're being at every single session and listening to all the stuff and taking all the notes. And it is a game that you have to play, and you have to be willing to put in the hours to get that. It's on you to do a lot of the work to make it worth it. And I think that part of the flaw of the system is that that's not how they're marketed. They're not marketed as you have to come and you do the work. They're marketed as come buy this ticket so that you can get this service, that the vibes are there and you just have to be there for them to, you know, for the stars to align and for the blessings to be showered on you. And I don't know that that's the case.
It's interesting you say that. We've been hearing from world artists, from classical artists, from like jazz artists, that they aren't sure that the conference circuit is really their best business model anymore. And they might be pulling away or looking for changes to conferences for that part of the industry, that part of the sector. Are there changes that could be made to conferences to better serve those types of artists, you know, smaller artists that don't have maybe big flashy stuff they're not showcasing because maybe the setting doesn't make sense for them? Like, what do you feel about changes that could be made to conferences to better serve artists more like yourselves?
I guess my spiciest take is that both Vikas and I have a really big bone to pick with showcases and showcasing at conferences in general. We really feel like, and this comes from the perspective of a longtime watcher and someone who hasn't showcased personally, so take this with a grain of salt, but that we feel like often the ecosystem that they're set up in doesn't serve the artist in the best way possible. And for the fact that the artist pays for this service, it feels like it's done in bad faith. And so I totally recognize the perspective of an artist who's like, I paid all this money to showcase and I don't feel like it was worth it. And part of that is just how it has been organized. If there are multiple showcases happening at the same time, you don't have the best shot. If you're on the third day, everyone has seen way too many showcases, so they're pretty fatigued. If they haven't been separated out by genre or style, then maybe you don't have the best shot because you're sewn in the middle of a bunch of other things. And maybe someone who wants to watch dance is actually in a different showcase or has already been to other things. And so I think, again, as someone who's not providing a solution, take this with a grain of salt, but I think that there's a lot that can be done to rectify how showcasing is, to make sure that you're, as an organizer, doing this in a way that you feel like you're creating the best possible opportunity for the artist and giving the best shot at getting exposure, because that's what this is. They're paying for exposure, for the opportunity to be seen, for the opportunity to be experienced by people who may or may not book them. And so it's a lot of money to put up front for a prospect. And so if you're taking that money as an organizer, I do feel like there are many simple ways in which you can optimize for that and give them just that much better of a shot at actually being seen.
Yeah, I think my answer to that would be, I think the status quo view in conferences, and I think Max is actually maybe the exception here, but typically at conferences, you're always coming in as a newbie with this won't even pay off for 3 years is what you're told. But financially, that cannot be the reality. Frankly, our first year conferencing was not the season that I met you, but the previous year, so 2024. We booked shows off of that first conference season. And we went in wanting to book shows because we're like, that is the only way that this financially pays off. We do not have the time to wait to spend $2,000 a conference for 3 conferences for 3 years before this pays off. It just doesn't work. And so we kind of had to give a middle finger to that approach and be like, nope, we're going to book a show the first season. It might not be the fanciest show, might be a small town, might be whatever, but we are, and we booked 4 shows the first season, and the season is looking better. And so I think there has to be an understanding from the people who have been in the conference circuit for a while that that mentality doesn't work. Yes, this industry is a long game, and also there has to be something that you can action on after your first one that makes it feel worth it to come back the second time. Because otherwise, a new artist is going to spend how many ever thousands of dollars the first season, and then Max or whoever is going to email them the next time, and they're going to be like, well, did I actually make my money's worth off of that first one, right? And it's really hard for an artist to be like, well, maybe I will the third time around, right? There's that quote that insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. That's kind of what the conferences are asking of their artists. And so I think that's kind of what Apoorva is getting at, is I think we can educate artists better on hey, maybe you don't showcase the first time because people won't show up to your showcase unless they know you, and you don't know anyone the first time. Those types of small things I think can help people be like, oh, I'm investing less the first time because my first year, my goal is just to meet people. And so I'm only spending those few $100, but then it's worth it because I'm only expecting so much in return, which is what we did our first year. And then the second year, we kind of actually got a table because now people know us, now that there's somewhere for those people to come. So those sorts of things I think are really critical to helping the artist feel like it's useful and that it's paying off each year. I think there's 2 types of artists, and this is an overgeneralization, but artists who are creating work because they believe the work itself inherently has value, no matter the volume of people that see it or interact with it. And there's artists who are really motivated by the volume of people that they impact. And I don't think one is better or worse, but I would qualify the second as like commercial artists, and the first is more sort of like, I don't know. And the conference world, and I don't think this is a problem, is designed for the second type of artist, the one who is more interested in the commercial appeal of their art. And so if you think that you are the first, I don't think the conference world is for you. And if you think you're the second, you have to be willing to do the non-artistic things, or hire people who are willing to do the non-artistic things, meaning hire your marketing person, like those things are critical to the business's success. And you either have to do them or hire people who are willing to do them. And if you're not willing to do that, then maybe that's not the type of artist you are. And so you have to ask yourself, like, why you're going to the like, why do you want to tour? That's a critical question you have to ask. And if it's like for fame and whatever, I think there's like, frankly, other ways, especially with TikTok. Like if you want viewers, like just go on TikTok. So like you have to really critically ask why touring is important to you. And I think once you answer that question, whether conferences are the right space for you or not will like quickly fall out.
All right. So you two might not know, but the podcast has a time machine. We like to take our guests back to the start of their careers and have you think about a specific moment in time. So I want to take you back to when you decided to start Project Convergence and meld these two art forms and figure out how to do this crazy thing that is the live performing arts industry together. What do you know now that you wish you had known then?
I wish I knew how much of an arts career was not just about making good art. And I don't think I understood that until, frankly, quite recently. But so much, especially of a touring arts career, is like we've talked about the marketing, the people you know, the connections you make, the relationships you have with those people, all of those sorts of things. And I wish that had been part of my training earlier, because I feel like I was trained really well artistically, but that part nobody ever teaches you to be successful in your career. And I feel like we both kind of had to learn that through fire and or through mentors helping us. And I wish I had known that earlier, because I could have worked on that skill earlier.
I think Vikas's answer is the right answer, but for the sake of giving you another answer, I'll chip in to add. I was trying very hard earlier on in my career to be at what I thought was the pinnacle of my art form and in my space. And so what that sort of felt like was, I just want to be the best dancer I could possibly be. I just want to get better at this. I want more people in my space to really just like see me and in my world. And it was very like trying to ascend a ladder in an insular closed space. And now I think that the biggest value of the work that I do is that I get to introduce new people to this type of work. I get to introduce new people to the idea of what dance on stage can look like. And I feel like I just get to break open many ideas and preconceived notions of what staged dance is just by doing this work. And so I think a big part of what has changed over the past several years has just been my vision for what a successful dance career looks like and what I want out of being what I guess in my head, I'm like, what am I doing with my life in the sense of what kind of person do I want to be? In union with being a dancer, as opposed to like what kind of dancer do I want to be as a part at the peak of a style or a type of artistry, versus like, no, I think I want to be the type of person that does this type of work, and that's not in a silo or in a separate lane from being a good dancer. Or
Well, Apoorva and Vikas, thank you so much for spending this time with us here on There's No Business Like. It's been such a pleasure to have you. I'm so glad we got to know each other at conference and it turned into this conversation. I cannot wait to hopefully see you in the Midwest at some time soon and get to see one of your shows live.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for having us, and looking forward to seeing you in our audience sometime soon.
Well, that was great, Katie. Thank you so much for bringing us Project Convergence, and also for starting at the top of the interview, like really describing what their creative process is, because even as they were sort of like talking about how it all goes together, I still couldn't really see it until they really did more of like a deep dive into their artistic practice. Now I want to come and be in the audience too, which is really super cool. But I think the part that at least I really want to talk about today is the idea of building a lighter, leaner dance company here, sort of in this decade, in this time that we're in now. And they're bi-coastal and they're building shows that are meant to tour. I'm sure that they do shows in their home areas, but really thinking about touring as a constraint when you're creating art, I think is really important in creating art right now, especially if you're from an artistic practice that doesn't have an endowment or some kind of like really deep financial pockets where it's harder to take bigger or any risks really. Cause every year it feels like budgets get tighter and tighter and, making and touring art is a risk very much in its own right. So building in the constraints of touring into that process was a great conversation to listen to. And like I've said this before, I think constraints are really important when we make art. No matter what it is that you're doing, you have some kind of constraints and they can either be a hindrance and be the thorn in your side, or they can be the thing that push you past whatever it is that you're doing and really find something new. You're going to have them no matter what. Everybody wants to have an unlimited amount of money, right? But what would you do if you had an unlimited amount of money, right? It's all about finding what works with like the time that we have, with the space that we have, with the money that we have, with our goals, right? Because we don't want to make a show that doesn't fit the goals of what it is we want it to do, right? All of those things are boundaries. And really thinking about the needs of touring is a conversation that I think really resonates.
I have to say, I appreciated that idea of removing some of the extra roles and like wearing the two hats to save money for the venues. From a venue perspective, I've worked with companies that do that. And sometimes it's very helpful. And in this case, it sounds like it would be because they're flexible with getting rid of some of the cues or whatever to make it work. Because it's all about the dance. It's not necessarily about the bells and whistles and the production values necessarily. I've worked with other companies, some dance companies in particular, that are very particular about every little cue being exactly right. And in those cases, it would be a hindrance to also have that person be a dancer or performer because they have to, they can't spend the amount of time that's needed on those cues and working the tech and all of that. So there are certain situations where it is good, but then challenging.
And like the kind of the flip side of it too is like, do I think dancers should also have to be lighting designers? No. Right. And do I think it's good to have a multi set of skills in your toolbox? Yes. I do think that there's a double-edged sword to it of like, it's great to be able to kind of have all those skill sets. Do I hope that that's what they're doing 20 years from now? No. But, it does feel like there is a need to, if you're a performer, to have some other technical or tour needed kind of skill set.
Yeah, and I also appreciated when they were specifically talking about, dance should be adaptable for not only 1,500 seat houses, but even down to 300 seat houses. And it's funny that they use those numbers because my first go as a presenter at Sussex was a 300 seat house, and I had I had a dance series where I would do at least 4 dance programs each year. Now I have one of my theaters is a 1,500 seat hall, and we just recently had a dance show. So looking at it from this side, the perspective, how different it is, the thing that I know, regardless of how you scale it, especially when they were talking about large companies, it's almost impossible to get the ticket sales to cover the cost of those shows. And so we've always had to supplement that with grants, which many of those grants don't exist anymore. And so there's a larger conversation to be had here about, how some of these larger companies, not Convergence in particular, but these larger companies that used to go through and stop at the college and university circuit was very vital for hopping and skipping between cities, which helped, cultivate a dance understanding and programming and appreciation in the more rural areas of the country, which has not been the case now that we've lost this funding. A lot of the colleges and universities, not all of them, but there's a lot where they completely lost their program. So the whole scene from 10 years ago, it's just a totally different picture now. And so fewer places are doing it. If the program even still exists, like my previous one, we got pushed to be more commercial and we had to cover our costs. We couldn't like they were describing, covering costs from one show that we know we're going to lose money on by supplementing it by having a popular show that's going to make money and help underfund it. That wasn't an option anymore for us. That's the old way that we used to do things. So many things are changing. And I think what we're seeing is that dance in the rural communities across America, and a lot of the region, I'm not saying everywhere, but a lot of places, has been kind of let go and not being cultivated. The company Convergence or Koresh Dance or Sharp Dance or some of these other companies that aren't necessarily household names, like, you know, some of the, like you mentioned, Joffrey, they're harder to sell now because you don't have that audience cultivated. So a lot of the presenters are not taking chances on, unless it's a known entity, or the known entities aren't even affordable because without the grant. So it's this big circular problem that dance is having right now. And I just want to be part of the solution, not just put it down and say there's all these issues, but because you guys all know that I love dance. I married a dancer, and I would love to see it continue and flourish throughout the country. But there's a real problem right now. And we don't see it in the cities. Like the cities are like living in bubbles right now, and they think everything's still, like I've talked to so many company managers and directors where they don't see that there's been a change even. But then you talk to the people that book their shows, their agents or their office managers and so forth, and they're the ones that are like, yeah, we need to be ringing alarm bells, and nobody seems to be worried because, you know, now we can't even go to the places we used to go that used to have these programs. They've either gone away or they've eliminated that programming. So how do we cultivate audiences in these places so tours can happen instead of just hopping from one city to the other city?
Yeah, Brian, I think that's such a great point. And listening that and thinking about how does Project Convergence fit into this shifting landscape. And I think they might be on the front cutting edge of a significant model shift. Like they are mission forward in making dance accessible to audiences of all sizes. And in all different types of communities, right? Something they really emphasize as part of our conversation. So if we can't fill gigantic houses and we can't afford these gigantic companies, I just wonder if we're not going to see the model shift significantly to the way that Convergence is doing it. Smaller companies, more companies perhaps, but smaller in nature, that are more flexible, that are more sustainable, that don't require as much grant funding. Dancers going out on their own, maybe attaching themselves to more regional companies that are situated in like mid-sized cities across the country versus, you know, kind of our arts hubs. And the ideas that they brought up about making the dance programming itself understandable from the get-go. I think there is a true point to, like, you know, concert length evenings of dance don't feel accessible to the average patron unless you are trained in dance. Because how do you understand the story? How do you sit still that long without a break? Like, how do you track all of those things? As a trained dancer, I love that and I appreciate that. But for your average dancer, like that, it loses you. It just loses you for the average patron. So if you're looking for things that they can bring the whole family to, it's a fun afternoon out there. We are talking about the intersection of like entertainment and joy and artistry. I just think there's a lot of nuggets here that companies could really pull out and start building and shifting their mindsets on. And it's going to be a slow turn. Like the model is going to be a slow turn, but it's necessary. And I think a model shift to maybe multiple but smaller companies would be interesting because I worry about employability of dancers. That's one of the things I've been thinking about a lot is like, we are saying we got to cut company size down, but then where do those jobs go? Where do those artists go? So that's got to be a part of the equation too, because we can make it more flexible and sustainable, but that also means losing jobs.
Yeah, and nothing against Convergence, but I don't think I'm saying anything that is, it's not meant to be negative anyway, but that's not exactly a household name, right? It's
yeah, they're new to the marketplace.
There's so many fantastic companies out there. They've got a model that works financially, but as a presenter in this time where nostalgia, known acts and all of that is what's keeping us alive financially, and audiences not coming out. Again, there's exceptions. We can find exceptions throughout the country, but on a whole, I'm talking about on a whole, people are just not taking chances on shows they don't know. And so it's harder to market that type of thing. And so it's going to be harder for a presenter, even though, yeah, that's great. Financially, those numbers look great. But if I'm not going to get anyone out to this audience, get an audience for you, I'm not going to do it. And the way back when I had a season, I had a dance season, a series, I would have at least 4 dance shows. 2 of them would be names. It would be literally Joffrey Ballet or Paul Taylor or Dance Theater of Harlem or whatever. I would have those names on the season. That would attract people to then get the season. And then I would have I'd have a ballet, I'd have a modern dance, I'd have a world dance of some sort. I had a Bollywood show one time from India. I've had, Chinese dance. I've had all kinds of different dance. So it would be a world dance would be in the season. And then I'd have like a miscellaneous. And one of my favorite shows was, they're not around anymore, but Rhythmic Circus, Feet Don't Fail Me Now, another great tap show. Fantastic. One of my favorite shows ever, actually.
Yeah, me too.
That was an unknown. That was something my audience did not know, but because they came to the whole series, they would say, oh, let me check it out. And they loved it, which I knew they would. And I think Convergence would be the same way. If you can get them there, it sounds like people would love it. But how do you get them there if they don't know them in this day and age? Again, back in 10, 15, 20 years ago, people would come out because it's something new. They wanted to experience it. You could tell them, oh, this is an exciting new company. But right now in this world we're in, people just want comfort and nostalgia. And that's really hard to bring something new. I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm not saying there aren't examples in the country. But again, how do we do that where they can get a full tour across the country, not just go to these pockets where it is happening?
Well, and I don't want to offer this as like a solution or the solution. But I do wonder if we're at a point where we start thinking about dance less as we're presenting the Joffrey Ballet, we're presenting the name, but more what's the hook, right? What's the topic? Like, I don't know that if I worked with them that I would necessarily like lead into the name of the company, but like the fact that it's a mashup, right? Or, whatever marketing language feels like the right version of mashup. And, in the youth and family space, I think I've seen lately a lot more of like the 45-minute to an hour dances of one story where it's not, individual dances that maybe don't have a through line like would happen if you went to see one of those like big companies, but it's, based on a book or it's based on something that we're seeing come to life, and they're incorporating all of the dance skill, but it's not something that's necessarily like shrouded in that, like, you have to know kind of feeling. And I wonder if leaning more into the title, like I feel like we do a lot for theater, or leaning into the, like, who is this for, or what is the thing that's new and interesting about this, might be a better way to think about presenting dance. I mean, this week we had the 90 Chen Dance Company, and the title of the piece that we did was rather long, but the thing that we emphasized was a celebration of the Lunar New Year. The description was all about it being the year of the horse, and that's not something that maybe appeals to the broad spectrum of everybody, but like there's a huge Asian population where we are. And on a Wednesday night, we were almost completely sold out because, there are people that really wanted to have an artful experience around that topic or that celebration of the Lunar New Year. And so, that might not be like our biggest audience that we have, but it certainly is an audience that's worth cultivating. And I think if you live in an area that has even a marginal amount of, immigrants from India or people of Indian descent, it's important to showcase that, and in a way that's accessible for maybe even a broader group of people, which this certainly feels like it could be. And I think, we can also frame this a lot about like an immigrant experience. And I think I'm in the city, right? And so there are a lot of people around me who have like a first or second generation immigrant experience, and what it feels like to have a culture, but then also be learning and growing into another one, and sort of like the places where it feels like it ebbs and it flows, and the tension that exists within that. And I think that we need to start, really start looking for groups that are kind of making art the way that Project Convergence is, because it can reflect the community that we have back to them. And we we need to be doing that more and more.
Danielle, that makes me think all the way back to our Mark Wilson interview in season 1, when Mark was talking about community engagement and building new audiences, similarly to how you're talking about building new audiences. And if you bring in, say, Project Convergence or a similar company, like it might not be the most popular the first time doing different dance styles, but like the more you do it, the more people learn about it, the more you build that muscle in your community, the more your audience will build, right? It just, if you do it one time and it's not successful, doesn't mean it won't be in the future, but it's something that you have to work at and you have to build, right? And you have to really message and do the engagement around and things like that. And then I also, to Brian's point about, Joffrey, Paul Taylor, and big names, I'm also wondering after this conversation about investment. Like we have to make money now, right? We've got to be sustainable now, but also like, how are we investing in the future? If we don't put time and energy and money into upstart companies like Convergence and some of these others that we're seeing in the marketplace, how will they ever build their reputations? How will they ever become a Joffrey Ballet or an Alvin Ailey if we never give them a chance to perform? And that is a tightrope to walk. That's a balance beam to walk. But I think we have to think about the longevity of the industry as well as sort of this current moment we're in.
You're right. How does it happen if we don't find the models or the venues, right, that can do that? And Brian was talking about like maybe a loss existing in the, college market, but like, where does that market, like, where is that emerging market now, right? Like, that's also a constraint. Like, we got to figure it out.
And don't forget the pendulum swings. So, this is not the first time these types of market shifts and demands have changed. They seem to always go back and forth. So right now we're in this time of wanting kind of more quote unquote commercial, feel good kind of known things, but it'll come back. People get tired of that and want to explore new art again. And so it'll be primed for when that happens. So we just need to make sure, as you said, about the sustainability, in both not only the arts organization that's touring, but the arts organization that can present them. So we need to support each other and just try to keep things going for when that time is right.
And I do think that was the theme of a lot of what they talked about in this interview was like, we're not one side or the other, right? We are in a contract. It's this side and this side, but like we need to collaborate and we need to work together all the time.
All right. Well, thank you to Vikas and Apoorva for joining me for this interview. It was such a pleasure to have this conversation. Thank you, Danielle and Brian, for joining me for this conversation too. And I hope you all will join us next time here on There's No Business Like.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening to There's No Business Like. Our producers and hosts are Brian Zelmer, Josh Benson, Kevin Maynard, Katie Miller, and me, Danielle Van Hook. Views expressed in this podcast are ours alone and are not reflective of the organizations we are a part of. Keep up with us at nobusinesslike.com. There you'll find links to all of our episodes and socials. If you like this podcast, give us a like, a follow, a review, or our favorite, a 5-star rating. Oh wait, what was that site? I got it, don't worry. It is nobusinesslike.com. Do I sound out bus-I-ness every time I type it? Yep, sure do. Stay in touch, my friends.
Does someone want to say, oh, that's an interesting thought, Katie, or that's something we definitely need to think more about, and then I can jump to the wrap just so it's not me going straight into me?
Go ahead, Danielle, because I was on the phone, so I'm not even sure what to call back.
I ended with investing not only in this moment but in the future.
I just have to say, Katie, I believe the children are our future. So.
What is it? Feed them well and let them lead the way? No, that's not the line.
Well. Teach them well.
Teach them well. Feed them well too, I guess.
Yeah, we can also feed them.
Nutrition's important.
Let's also feed them. Yeah.
Okay.